Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Star Trek Beyond is directed by Justin Lin, written by Simon Pegg and Doug Yun. Star Trek Beyond is the 13th film in the Star Trek franchise and the sequel to Star Trek Into Darkness. Now, like the past two installments of the Star Trek Reboot films, the cinematography and special effects look just as good as before, so moving on to the next topic, I suppose. It really goes without saying that the film score by Michael Giacchino is good for Star Trek Beyond. Now, when I was watching this film in theaters, I could have sworn that part of the film score has a nod to the original Star Trek television series with its music. But I might be wrong in this case because it was really hard to pinpoint on what particular scene, but I could have sworn there was a slight resemblance somewhere. But say what you will, but that's just how I perceived it, I suppose, in terms of how I was hearing the film score. But like I said, film score is great. The overall acting in this film is pretty good, for the most part. Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, Simon Pegg, and even John Cho do not disappoint in this film. They have all been consistent since the first Star Trek Reboot film. Unfortunately, Star Trek Beyond proved to be Anton Yelchin's final performance in the Star Trek Reboot films after he tragically passed away before this film was released. And Anton Yelchin was just as good as always. But the one actor that was a little off was Idris Elba. And it really pains me to say that because I do like Idris Elba as an actor. I think Idris Elba is a talented actor. But the way he plays Krall is a little heavy. And also that heavy breathing that Krall has in this film is kind of a little bit laughable in this film. I couldn't help but laugh a bit. When it comes to the characters, the ones you recognize from the Starship Enterprise are what you would expect them to be. As for characters exclusive to this film, Jaylah was a cool addition to the Star Trek Reboot films, and I do like her character. As for Krall, however, I won't say much, but I'm going to be really honest with you, I didn't really care for Krall all that much. As for the plot, there is a reason why I left out a synopsis for this review. It is because what happens in the first act is quite heavy, and I really didn't want to spoil it for you in case you did not want to know leading up to seeing Star Trek Beyond. But what happens in the first act of Star Trek Beyond is something that I think could have been saved for the third act of this film. That was until I saw this film's progression that I actually appreciated what this first act did. It was thinking outside the box, which is something I will commend the staff of Star Trek Beyond for doing. Because as the film progresses, the flow of the plot of Star Trek Beyond actually starts to be a little bit more understandable, and I do appreciate this kind of structure. I'm going to give you a bit of a fair warning regarding this film. The second act of Star Trek Beyond is slow, but methodically slow, and I'm actually okay with this because Star Trek Beyond actually did one thing that the previous two Star Trek Reboot films lacked. And this one factor is also lacking considering Star Trek's original intent. And this derives from the opening monologue, where the Starship Enterprise is in its 5-year mission to explore a strange new world and long-lost civilizations. The one thing I've noticed about the reboot films of Star Trek is that they're more action-packed and less involved in exploration. There is some exploration going on in Star Trek Beyond that I think is focused a little bit more than the previous 2 Star Trek reboot films. Now look, I don't mind action in Star Trek, but if you're going to put most of the attention of the action on Star Trek, then it kind of defeats the purpose of the name of Star Trek. And I know this is going to sound kind of annoying that I'm going to be comparing these reboot films to the original show, but I had to, because the original television series of Star Trek had that balance of action and exploration. Now, I understand that these are films and you have to have certain time limits to what you can put in a film and what you can put in a television show. I understand how those two mediums work. But what about the 6 Star Trek films that followed the original series? There was a bit of a balance of action and exploration. Sure, The Wrath of Khan was mostly focused on action. But there was another Star Trek film that came later that was mostly exploration. So, I hate to say this, the reboot films have kind of been guilty of being more action-packed. But I'm glad that Star Trek Beyond took the time to explore a new world in order to solve a problem. I can't say as to what the problem is because that would spoil part of the film. And like I said, I really don't want to give away much because I am reviewing a film that came out like 3 weeks ago as I'm reviewing this. What I'm trying to say is that the plot to Star Trek Beyond is a bit refreshing when compared to the past 2 installments of the Star Trek reboot films. And I am glad that this film decides to take time away from the action. So that's another thing I like about Star Trek Beyond. I can assure you that the 3rd act of Star Trek Beyond is a treat. Now, if you are a diehard Trekkie, bring tissues with you, because there is one touching moment. Even I got a bit teary-eyed. I just can't tell you what it is, though. That's for you to find out. Overall, Star Trek Beyond, in my opinion, is the weakest Star Trek reboot film. Now, that should not discourage you from seeing this film, because I personally enjoyed the previous 2 Star Trek reboot films more than Star Trek Beyond. But I still recommend this to anyone that likes science fiction, and I strongly recommend it to the Trekkies, because this film does not disappoint. Now, if you have the opportunity to go see this in the theaters, please, go see this in the theater. But if you're unable to see it in theaters, then just wait till it's on video on demand, digital, retail, or DVD and Blu-ray. Whatever you go with. But seriously, this is a voyage that is not to be missed. Star Trek Beyond gets an 8. If you like this review, feel free to hit the like button. And if you want to follow my channel, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. And as always, you're welcome to leave me a comment if you feel so inclined. And thanks for watching. Now, I am aware that my Marvel Cinematic Universe marathon has been put on hold in favor of my reviews of the Star Trek reboot films. Now, I'm going to have to continue putting the Marvel Cinematic Universe marathon on hold in favor of another set of reviews thanks to the release of another reboot film that came out. But before I do that, I need to make a very important phone call.